Master, just like that. Got a few more things to wrap up, so we'll be starting into chapter 24. Wrapping up with 23 and 24, by the way, kind of go together. I talked to Kimmy a little bit about this. So 24 is not really like new material, but it is monetary policy using aggregate and aggregate supply. So all three of these chapters kind of go together. And you got the test due on Sunday night. So it's open now, though. You can get in there anytime for 22 and 23. And then Monday, or I think Tuesday, I set the homework for 24. You can do it anytime again, set your own schedule. And then Wednesday night. And then the final is Friday morning. So that's kind of what our week and a half looks like. Does anybody have any questions on that?
10 a.m. Friday morning.
I can't remember. 10? So it is?
Chapter 24 test due.
Wednesday night. But it's open. You can do it sooner if you want, but Wednesday night at the latest. The video project. I don't know if you remember, there's a video project. So on your syllabus, I thought I'd call that to your attention. If you pull out your syllabus, you basically can get into, you can do it by yourself, first of all, or you can get into up to groups of 3. And a short 2-minute to 4-minute video about any macroeconomic topic that you think is interesting. I give additional points or credibility if it makes me laugh or if it's creative. So it's meant to be fun. Not necessarily a purely academic, so the ones that I grade the harshest are the ones that are just strictly reading off something or whatever. So, but at the same time, you have full creative liberty. I don't give you a lot of guidelines. So, any questions there? That is Tuesday. And you can do it sooner again. And you'll upload it to Blackboard, so you can do it sooner if you want. That is Tuesday, Tuesday night. It'll be a night deadline or whatever. All right.
How do we upload that? Is it just on Blackboard?
Yeah, you just go to the Blackboard thing and press upload. Now the video file. So let me comment a couple things. One, if you upload it to like YouTube and then just put the link on the Blackboard site, that's totally fine. Or if you put the whole video file on there, make sure that it's not 4 gazillion size file size that takes forever to upload. So you can use some of your software. You guys know better than me on how to compress some of those videos. That's the advantage of putting it up to YouTube. You can compress them. Make sure they're not too huge of a file size. Also make sure that they're in a JPEG or a general format that I can view. Sometimes I get people who do it on maybe iPhone or it's like iMovie or whatever, I don't know, some sort of software that I can't open. It has to be in a general format like JPEG or not JPEG, what am I trying to say? MP4. So, okay, questions there? Fun. All right, so today we're going to wrap up 23, trying to get into 24. But I want to frame things a little bit differently by focusing in on the business cycle. So the business cycle is the ups and downs of the economy over time. So it's real GDP being measured on the vertical axis, time on the horizontal, expansion, recession, trough. It's the squiggly line over time of the economy. And so we know that real GDP fluctuates. That's part of the cycle part. But there is no rhythmic, random thing that anybody's ever been able to mathematically model and predict exactly what the economy's going to do. So the word cycle is almost misleading. That almost sounds like it's rhythmic or something predictable, right? That you could do, but it's certainly not the case. Nobody's been able to figure that out. And so we have different business cycle theories. And so theories of the business cycle. Number one, I'll start off with the Keynesian theory. So John Maynard Keynes, we've talked about him a lot in different ways. He focuses in on the kind of the cause or the impetus of the business cycle. The main cause is animal spirits, which sounds a little weird. Crazy animal spirits. And so his thought was that business people are kind of unpredictable and wild, and they like to speculate, and they'll be rolling the dice. And so these animal spirits with investment lead to speculative investment, or it's focused on speculative investment, which then drives shifts in aggregate demand. The other feature that Keynes thought was there was sticky prices / wages. And what he meant by sticky is that there's a tendency for those to remain a little more fixed. And so Keynes' view of the economy, if we were to put it back to an aggregate demand, aggregate supply framework, he would have the short-run aggregate supply curve being relatively flat. That's somewhat capturing the sticky price feature, with that being fairly flat. And aggregate demand just kind of is what it is. And so we get these fluctuations in the economy from volatile investment demand. The animal spirits kick us to the right, kick us to the left. And notice that when this is flatter, we get more movement, right? Imagine if this was steeper, like this, and this shifted, there wouldn't be as much wiggling going on, right? So part of the sticky wages gets us a lot of movement in aggregate demand. That was, in a nutshell, kind of Keynes' vision of the economy, is that we need to tame the animal spirits. So the taming that he had in mind was government intervention. So his prescription for this condition of ours was to use government intervention. So the key solution to this is use government intervention of fiscal or monetary policy to tame the beast. That's a Russ McCullough quote there. That I've never used that before, but I think I like it. So these animal spirits, that had nothing to do with Keynes there. Tame the beast. And so we can offset some of these swings by using government policy. All right, so there's a number of things that have later been criticized of Keynes that we'll see in some other things that we'll cover. Questions on Keynes' idea? So if the beast is swinging from here to here, we can use contractionary fiscal policy to soften the blow, or contractionary monetary policy. And from this business cycle picture, the idea would be, here's the free market economy going crazy. Let's use fiscal and monetary policy to stabilize the business cycle. So, stabilize with government policy. Question mark. And that's a big question mark because Freeman later would show that maybe this has a destabilizing effect, that it's really not contributing to stabilization, in fact, causing some inefficiencies in the market. Okay, questions there? All right, so let's see. So Freeman had the monetarist theory, which would be more of Freeman. Brings in rational expectations, which he didn't actually invent, by the way. That was something a little different, but it kind of supported as the monetarist theory evolved over time. But I'd say this monetarist theory really was initiated with Freeman in the 1960s, is when it really started to gain traction. I think he wrote some of his early papers in the 50s, mid-50s. But so we covered rational expectations last time, which helped support a market economy that had prices clearing faster than what maybe Keynes would have said. And so I didn't draw the long run, by the way, in the first one, because Keynes would have said in the long run we're all dead. I could have put a long run in there. I think conceptually it's there, but he might have just had that short run in there anyway. So home base that we've drawn a few different times. So contrary to the title, Milton believed that prices cleared fairly quickly. So if we go through what we did before, there's some sort of aggregate demand shock, a shift to the right, and that would move the economy from, let's call it point A to point B in the short run because of the price lag between input prices and output prices. As output prices would start to adjust, we would see further inflation with resource prices catching up, and the economy would move to point C. This is all kind of review from what we did before, so I'm kind of going fast. Slow me down if you need me to. What I wanted to get to was Freeman's thought here, and that is, if markets clear fairly fast in terms of pricing, this lag time between output prices and resource prices isn't really that long at all, which is part of what rational expectations supported, then his policy prescription was to screw around with monetary policy, to actually come up with a fixed policy. And that ties into the quantity theory that we did in chapter 22. So the monetarist theory has movement from A to B to C is fairly quick. So movement from A to B to C is fairly quick. Let me put a little other note in here. This is kind of a classical economist thought of markets clearing. efficiently. Since that's the case, or if that's the case, I should say, jury was still out, still is, then the prescription that Freeman put forth was to fix monetary policy. A fixed monetary policy is better than a discretionary policy. Also called a feedback policy. But if something's at your discretion, what does it mean? You get to decide, you get to choose. So Janet Yellen and the board gets to kind of decide monetary policy. Freeman was more on board of almost not abolishing the monetary system and the Federal Reserve, but rather to tie their hands more so that we had a fixed rule rather than discretionary policy. Okay, so that is one of the key descriptions, and the quantity theory of money, chapter 22 stuff, is what he turns to for support. So I'll just put quantity theory of money. All right, so now time for the new thing. A relative new, something we haven't talked about. I'm going to spend a lot of time on, but your textbook gets into it a little bit. So. Everybody cool on monetarists? Real business cycle theory. So real business cycle theory says that maybe supply isn't as stable as we thought. Maybe the long-run aggregate supply curve is not that stable, which is a bit of a shocker. So they also believed price is clear, so kind of the classical thought, prices clear efficiently. And that means the long-run aggregate supply curve is basically equal to, put a little squiggly here, the long-run aggregate supply curve is basically equal to the short-run aggregate supply curve. In other words, in their world, if prices do indeed clear efficiently, remember how Keynes had a flat short-run aggregate supply curve? Freeman would say they clear fairly quickly. Well, the quicker you make prices clear, the more vertical the aggregate supply curve is. I'm just going to say that they're, even though that's not being totally fair. But there is not this distinction in a market system that where resource prices and output prices clear quickly. So the problem with this would be if that's our setup and aggregate demand shifts to the right, we don't get any fluctuations, right? So if there's a shift of aggregate demand due to animal spirits or anything else, the economy tends to be right around its potential. So they kind of threw traditional theory in the face and said, well, maybe it's not as stable as we thought. Maybe this thing jockeys around a little bit. Which didn't make quite as much sense with the way I laid it out to you originally. Long-run aggregate supply curve shifted because of what reasons? Resources and technology. So technology is one of the things that they thought was a contributing factor, and their models do tend to work better in the last, let's call it 30, 40 years. So when we get computers, so we have an increase in resources, but we really don't know how to use the computer, right? And so a lot of people point towards the 90s and into the 2000s as a time where we really started to use our technology to increase output greatly. And so we have, the technology was there, but we didn't really use it. So they refer to technology shocks, that the economy is always being kind of impinged on Steve Jobs and some other technology gurus that are coming out with new things all the time. So we always have this continual shock of technology into the economy, and that is what's causing fluctuations, is more of this type of thing. Now they also had output going down sometimes, which again is a little bit weird to think, how would it go down? So some of the things they might point to anecdotally would be, you get a new computer at work and nobody knows how to use it, and it takes us a year to learn how to use it, right? So even though we just spent a bunch of money on the technology, we don't really know how to use it fully. And so there's a slowdown in productivity. The number of units of output per your 8-hour shift, you're not getting as much output for every unit of input, right? So that's our productivity. So they talk about productivity shocks and tried to work that into their model. And so sometimes it holds up, sometimes it doesn't. Is kind of the moral of the story, but it's an interesting one to point out. The other thing that you'll see in your textbook that's pointed out that I thought is relevant to maybe the election this year is they point to undue regulation. So the long-run aggregate supply curve in theory is due to the resource base. How many workers do you have? How many machines? The natural resources at your disposal, and technology. But if the government comes in and says, you can't use those resources, i.e. coal, because it's going to kill the environment, you're going to hurt people 200 years from now. Today, that causes us to not be able to effectively use those resources, right? That's a good, think about that one for a sec. We have a resource base which we've kind of naively thought of as a stockpile of resources, which is okay for some of our economic models as we start to think about them. But as we layer in restrictions or the law of the land on how those can be used, if those become more restrictive, then it's kind of like taking those resources away. It'll have the same impact. So we've got that playing on top of this technology thing, leading to this real business cycle theory. So some of the economic growth that I think Trump is thinking he can pull off as leader the next 4 years is by reducing some of that regulation that will move the long-run aggregate supply curve to the right. That's the idea, or that's the thought, or that's how the real business cycle model would show that. Okay, questions or comments there? All right, let's do one example. Let's see, where is it here? All right, here we go. Let me leave that out. Okay, so suppose that Congress, for example, wants to implement a national sales tax. Suppose Congress passes a national sales tax. Do we have that already? Sales tax? Do we have sales tax? Yes. Is it national? No. So all tax in the nation is currently income tax, but it doesn't have to be that way. Other countries have a combination of sales tax as well. So suppose it passes a national sales tax. What is the impact on the economy? What is the impact predicted using our aggregate demand, aggregate supply model? Okay, you can work in partners. Go. I'll come around and help you out. I want to see some action on your paper rather than me spoon feeding you. Use aggregate demand, aggregate supply, and show the impact of a national sales tax. This could be very similar to a final exam question. Yeah, you can start with it if you want to put the long run aggregate supply curve, put that in there. But yeah, that's the right idea. Make sure you put your labels of what comes first, use ones and twos. Aggregate demand, wrong direction. Wrong direction for growth. So one thing to think about, would this be inflationary or deflationary? Like, what's your gut feeling going into it? Would this thing tend to cause a rise in prices or a decrease? Upward pressure or downward pressure on inflation? Downward, why?
Because like if you're adding this,
Okay. But what's going to happen to the final price of the good? It's going to go up or down? It's going to go up, all right? So if we think about a sales tax Now this is where this one does. The reason I asked this one, and this is a little bit tougher, but the tax, if we go back to micro class, is always shared between. So if we go back to Budweiser, we showed the supply curve with the tax, right? And then the tax was paid for by the consumer and the producer. And the quantity after the tax was less than the original quantity. So we got kind of the same thing because it's a national sales tax. It's affecting all goods. We kind of have a similar concept going on for it, right? So aggregate supply curve should be or can be shown off to the left. But at the same time, that's going to cause a decrease in the quantities being exchanged. Right? Try to draw that, and then I'll come around. Here's your home base. You got aggregate demand going down too. And 1, 2, 3. Okay, so you got aggregate demand. Left.
Well, yeah.
Right.
And I'm not getting raised by it.
Aggregate demand. And why is that? What are part of the aggregate demand factors? Yes. Well, okay, so let's bring this back around. I just wanted you guys to have a chance to kind of think about it, put it down. This one, for one thing, sometimes these models are kind of difficult to work with, frankly. Some economists would like to throw these out the window. So one thing is this, that when the economy has a decrease in GDP, we get the increase in inflation. And so it is the prices of those things being pushed up along with it. And so I think the question is, would we ever get back to our potential, right, in the long run? So the short run effect is this. So and some of you started to have adjustments down of other things, but there would start to be downward pressure on resource prices and other output prices, and it would deflate. Would naturally, if this was an adjustment on the resource base, the prices would go up, and we would drop into recession. So that's our short run effect, done. Not too much shifting. So we're all done with prediction be recession, so an increase in inflation, and a decrease in real GDP. What if there was a simultaneous reduction in the income tax? So some of you might remember the fair tax that we went over, which was a national sales tax. But the difference was that was going to replace the income tax. So the sales tax of 23% that the fair tax folks put out was going to replace the income tax. So if the income tax is removed at the same time the sales tax is put into place, what would be your predictions there? How would the income tax, what would that do? Okay. So which one gives us more bang for the buck? Sales tax. So think about how that tracks through in the economy. How is the sales tax fundamentally different than the income tax? Good. So in the labor market or the output market? The labor market, right? In the resource market. So the income is being generated. I was going to pull out my little. Oops, sorry, Kaylee. Didn't mean to throw my club at you. We're taking it from different markets. Right now, we do have a sales tax, which is in the output market, and then the income tax or resource taxes are in the resource market. So we're taking them from different places, and the difference is that when we tax resources, we get a decrease in the quantity of resources. So if this is the resource market, then instead of beer here, it's labor. And so if we take away that tax, it actually bumps up the quantity of labor. And if there's more labor, which one of these gets affected? If there's more labor out there working, GDP, right? The long-run aggregate supply curve with GDP, we've effectively put more into the economy, again, due to the structure. Kind of similar to what we were bringing up over here with regulation. By not taxing income, we're putting more resources to work. Now, we still have higher prices at the cash register. What does that induce us to do? Spend less. So now we're spending less at the cash register at Walmart. We're saving more. Saving it where? Saving it at a bank or a financial institution. What are they doing with it? Loaning it out to businesses who are now acquiring machines and capital. So now we have another bump of resources. So potentially hits us on the labor and capital markets so that we'd be moving this direction with that. And so if it was offsetting in terms of the public good aspect, we have the sales tax set high enough so that it's capturing the same amount of tax dollars as the income tax. The prediction is that we would free up resources and see some more economic growth. All right, so let me throw that one up here. Oops, we got to get to our video. So what if sales tax replaced the income tax? Question mark. All right, so we would potentially increase the resource base. And push out to this new level of income. The initial effect, the way we did the shift of the supply curve would be to here, and then the economy would continue to deflate, ultimately to, I got the intermediate step here, so let me do. So the path would be to lower prices, more output. All right, we got just enough time to get this video in. I'll roll that back up and see if there's questions after. Some of you have seen this before that had me. Let's see. That's not good. We do not have audio today. This thing looks like it's working fine. Well, this one is definitely no fun without the audio. All right, if I don't get this to work, we'll do one more example. We'll do this on. No. Sounds like this thing might be just. Oh wait. Okay. Now we're talking. So this is Keynes and Hayek on this thing. So we'll go over this more on Friday as well.
Your agenda.
That won't be necessary. I have the agenda. Tell them I've arrived. And then tell them I've arrived.
And your name is?
Hayek. F-A-I.
So Hayek is our free market guy.
Ready? Hey, listen, are you fed? Already. 20 minutes. Lonnie. John Maynard, Keynes. F.A. Yeah, we're opposed. We oppose each other philosophically in the same studio. Back and forth for a century. I want to see it. I want the there's a woman outside and the reason to fear it. It's an animal spirit. John Maynard Keynes wrote the book on modern macro. How can he be when the economy's all shut? Depression, recession. Now your questions in session. Have a seat and I'll show you one simple lesson. Cool, 1929, the big crash. We did it downstream, economies in the trash. Persistent unemployment, the result of sneaky wages. Waiting for recovery, that is outrageous. I had a real bad, any fool can understand. The advice real simple, who's aggregate demand? Sweet, I-G, all together gets to Y. Keep that total going, watch the economy fly. Keep it going back and forth for a registered to change. Circular flow, the tone is everything. So if that's where it's getting low, doesn't matter. The reason we need more government spending. Now it's stimulus season, so forget about it. Get it straight out of your head. Like I said, in the long run, we're all dead. Savings is destruction, that's the paradox of thrift. Don't keep money in your pocket on that global level. Because this is driven by the animal spirits, the bull and the bear. And there's reasons to fear its effects on capital investment, income, and growth. That's why the station building government stimulus votes no monetary evidence. They're equally important. Government works, making just war has its same effect. You're broken riddles like last man has a multiplier, try to tire the economy's health. And if the central bank's interest rate policy takes a liquidity trap, making money suck in the banks, deficits to be the core you've been looking for. Let the spending soar. Now you know the score. My general theories made quite an impression. I transformed the econ profession. You know me, modesty, still I'm taking it back. So say it loud and say it proud. We're all Keynesians now. We've been going back and forth for a century. I want to see a market. I want them set free. There's a woman bus cycle and good reason to fear it. I make my case straight. Listen up, can you hear it? It is full strokes, just like my friend James. His theory conceals the mechanics of change. A simple equation. Too much aggregation ignores human action and motivation. Getting degrees as a justification for bailouts, payoffs, black holes with machinations. Provide them with cover to sell free lunch. Then all that relax with these debt and a rush. If you're looking high on that cheap credit off, go look for a deal from the air of the law. Real savings come first if you want to invest. The market coordinates time with interest. Your focus on spending is pushing on credit. And a long run, my friend, is your theory instead. So sorry, everybody, if that sounds like effective, prepare to get schooled in my Wall Street perspective. Even going back and forth for a century, I want to see a market. I want them set free. There's a woman bus cycle and good reason to fear it. It's an animal spirit. The place you study isn't the bus, it's the goal that you make you feel leery. That's the thrust of my theory. The capital structure is key. Malinvestments wreck the economy. The boom gets started with extension of credit. The Fed sets rates low when you started to get it. That your money is confused for real loanable loans. But it's just inflation that's driving the ones who invest in new projects like housing construction. The boom plants the seeds for its future destruction. And the savings are real, consumption's up too. And the gravity for resources reveals the truth. So the boom starts to come as the interest rates rise. The cost of production pricing is relies. The boom was a binge that's a fact. Now the key value capital that makes it the slack. For the rest of the late 70s or 2005, booming bad investment seems like they thrive. You must aim to invest, don't use the printing press, or a bus will surely follow, an economy depressed. Your so-called stimulus will make things worse. Just more of the same, or incentives perverse. And that credit choice ain't a liquidity trap. Just a broke banking system, I'm done, that's a wrap. Leave it going back and forth for a century. I want to see a market, I want them set free. There's a woman bus cycle and good reason to fear it. It's an animal spirit. The ideas of economists and political philosophers, both when they are right and when they are wrong, are more powerful than is commonly understood. Indeed, the world is ruled by little else. Practical men who believe themselves to be quite exempt from any intellectual influence are usually the slaves of some defunct economists. The curious task of economics is to demonstrate to men how little they really know about what they imagine they can design.
All right, so a little rap to end up the end of the day. We'll pick up there on Friday. Keep those sheets handy. We'll be going over that on Friday. So Jacob, you gonna be in Friday? Jacob, are you sleeping? Jacob, 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 Jacob. I can't see his eyes, so I might be sleeping. Hello? Oh, there he is. Take your phone, take your mic off.
Yeah,
So you're gonna be in Friday?
yeah, I'll be here.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right. See you Friday.
yeah.
Okay. Oh, really?
What do I need to do? Make up points?
Well, check back with me. I don't know if we'll have anything in class or not, but we will be
So you're
fairly
going over
deep
that
into
sheet?
24. We'll be going over this sheet, but then this stuff all ties into chapter 24 too. So if you can keep read ahead, might be good, and then probably watch the recording. That'd be best. All right.
Thanks.
Is that the first of the year?
Yep. First and only.
All right. Good luck.
Yeah. It's too early.
Yeah.